So if you're a manager and you sit on management teams and you're looking at this title from status updates to strategic discussions and saying, oh my God, this is so what I need, this webinar is for you. We've been working with management meetings for many, many years, especially in organizations that are international and deal with very, very large budgets. And what we found over the years, and this was really regardless of the type of company we were working with or where they were around the world, was that more and more meetings that were called management meetings weren't really management meetings, but rather these long and tedious sessions that had 5, 6, 7 agenda items planned. All of the agenda items were very operational by nature. You only got through 2 if you were lucky, and even then you weren't exactly sure what the takeaway was. Certainly no major strategic revelation came out of these meetings, and bottom line, it was a waste of time. And so the purpose of this model is to see how we can maximize the business and organizational values that are yielded from management meetings. The assumption at the base of this model is that management meetings can and should be rated in a way that indicates their strategic contribution. And the emphasis is on the strategic contribution, meaning if you have the top senior most executives of your organization sitting around a table, they should be operating like a think tank. They should be focused on putting the combined brain power and the combined experience that they have, being apparently the senior most talent in that organization, that should be put towards solving big problems, and not necessarily, or certainly not exclusively, around we have a fire we have to put out, or we have 2 projects that are above budget or behind deadline, or we have a conference in 4 weeks and we have to make sure that we're ready. These are really important things and they need to be dealt with. But I will contend that they don't need to be dealt with within the formats of management meetings. There are other meetings with some of the same participants that should be held dealing with these operational fires. But when management members meet under the title of a management meeting, those meetings should be highly strategic, and they should be looking at some of the most challenging mid to long-term aspects the organization is dealing with. So how does this start? How should you evaluate how effective your management meetings are? That's what I'm going to be showing you in this webinar. I'm going to recommend that you look at 4 key variables. Number 1, look at the Northern Star. Number 2, does your team operate in a way that indicates managerial independence? Number 3, every one of the management members sitting around the table has a mindset. Is that mindset silo or professionally oriented, or is it cross-organizational, high-level managerial oriented? And finally, when you look at the agenda of these meetings, would you say that you have the right focus? So let's dive into every one of these just so that you can understand this more precisely. And really, again, I'd like at the end of this webinar for you to be able to walk into the next management meeting with a piece of paper in your hand and take notes for yourself and really be able to give your team a score, which will help you then see how you can improve. So the Northern Star looks at variable components. It looks, first of all, at the vision. The vision is that point in the future, the reality we hope to create. And that vision has to be very, very well defined. It's that single point where no matter where you are in the organization, what your talent is, what profession you're responsible for, this is how you're allocating your resources. Everybody's rowing in this direction. Number 2, has this vision been broken down into key components or into key pillars that we can then later relate to in every initiative that we undertake or even just evaluate? If you are a management team of an organization within a larger organization, let's say you're head of procurement, or let's say you're head of a certain geographic region, maybe you're head of marketing, maybe you're head of HR. At the end of the day, you have a management team, you're running an organization, and there's a bigger enterprise that you're part of. In that case, what you need to ask yourself is, yeah, we have a vision, maybe we've broken it down into pillars, but have we done the job of linking our vision to the organization's grand strategy? Because at the end of the day, we are part of a bigger organization, and we, again, want to make sure everybody within the broader enterprise is rowing in the same direction. Next is values. Values is less about where we're trying to get to and more about how we want to get there. What are the constraints that we're going to adopt? What are the culture that we're going to adopt through which we want to accomplish our vision? And finally, does every single management member know the answer to these four questions, and is it the same answer? This is very, very important. Sometimes you have very, very dominant chairmen of management teams that will sit in a room with their own consultants and create a vision and break it down into pillars, but will not communicate it effectively to the rest of the team, in which case we don't usually have a vacuum. What we have is different interpretations of where we're trying to get to, and while everybody's operating with the best of intentions to get to that destination, the fact remains that we have multiple destinations that's never been aligned, never been properly communicated. So once you've answered these 5 questions, you're ready to give yourself a score, even initially an intuitive score of, do we have a Northern Star? The second point is also very, very important. I've seen in a lot of organizations how people that were really great at their job got promoted. But at one point, that promotion that you get moves you from being a star player, somebody who can score the goal, to being the manager, right? To being the coach of that team. And yet, in many, many cases, we find that the leader is basically now a bottleneck rather than being a force multiplier. We don't want the chairman of the managerial team to be the star player on the team. We want them to be the conductor of the orchestra. We want them to set the tone. We want them to set the direction. And we ultimately want them to empower the rest of the management team, who in turn will empower the people who are working for them, ultimately creating a situation where, starting from the top of the pyramid and all the way down, people are empowered to do more. And so one of the things we want to look at is the leader a bottleneck or force amplifier? How dependent is the team on this leader? When a management meeting takes place and certain questions come up, is that person the first to answer? Does the rest of the team wait for that person to answer? Will the team be meeting and automatically start shooting problems at the table and at the chairman, waiting for that person to answer it? Or do we have the correct situation where the chairman, as well as some of the other management members, are introducing challenging questions to the group, but then the group is also coming up with the solutions and not constantly dependent on that manager? And this can be even very technical. If the chairman can't make a management meeting, is that reason enough to cancel it? Generally, the answer should be no. If we are a strong team and we're well aligned around a vision and we understand our roles, we should be able to proactively and independently move processes within the organization without always being dependent on the person who's heading that management team. And of course, once solutions are designed and agreed upon, how dependent are we on the chairman of that team to be involved in the actual implementation of the solution? And this is where we have to be very aware of the difference between micromanagement, which is something we definitely want to stay away from, where the chairman or the senior manager intervenes in every activity and doesn't just tell you what needs to be done, but tells you how it needs to be done and when it needs to be done and with whom it needs to be done, in which case, boom, the leader is a bottleneck. Versus being micro-involved, which is a situation where our chairman is operating at 20,000 feet, providing us the proper air cover that's necessary in context of his or her relationships with other senior executives in the broader enterprise. But that doesn't mean that that leader should not be involved and understand the details of the operation. That involvement is very, very important. The third aspect I want to talk about, which is very important, and it has a material impact on the previous point, is, when you're a management member, usually you're wearing 2 hats. One hat, which is the hat you're wearing most of the time, is what we would call a professional hat. That's when you're managing your own silo, you have your own domain within the organization, and that's what you wake up every morning doing, and you're responsible. You have your own management team within that silo, and you're subject to a budget, and you have targets, and you're very, very under the gun, right? The second hat you're wearing is when you actually sit around a management meeting, in which case you are part of a different team. You are part of the leadership team of the organization. And when you're wearing that hat, your mindset, your entire predisposition should be aimed towards cross-organizational considerations, at times in a way that will come at your own expense from a professional perspective. Just imagine that you're in a management meeting and you're talking about a restructuring of the organization, or you're preparing for next year's budget. If you're silo-oriented, you're constantly thinking about, okay, how is this going to affect my operations? Is this going to take away from the resources that I have? Is this going to make it harder for me to meet my goals? I'm going to do everything I can around this table to make sure that doesn't happen. That's a silo approach, and that's an unhealthy approach from a managerial management perspective, a management team. Whereas you could be sitting around the table, and this is what I would encourage, and you say, okay, I'm going to put aside my own silo considerations, and I'm going to now swear allegiance to this team that's around the table. And if I need to support a move that will do better for the organization at large, even at my own operational expense, if I am in fact convinced that this is the right strategic move for the entire organization, sure, I will raise my hand and support that move. Hell, I might even proactively be the one leading that move. And so when I sit in meetings as a consultant and I watch the dynamics, one of the things I kind of take notes for myself is how many times did I see silo considerations being put to the table versus how many times did I see the team demonstrate a true team effort around strategic solutions, even at their own expense. This is a very, very important point if you want to create true, strong management teams and real cross-organizational collaboration. And finally, we're going to be looking at managerial focus. And this talks about, what is it that we're talking about, right? When we get together, there's a list of items that we want to talk about. Are these operational items? Are these strategic items? Many, many times the problem is that they are in fact operational. And this, I spoke to this in the beginning of the webinar where I said, everybody's under the gun. There's a lot of pressure. Some of the projects are in red and we have to solve them. There's a deadline, blah, 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 right? And so let's just get on this and put out that fire. Versus, are we talking about agenda items that are truly, truly strategic, like which strategy are we applying? What type of people should we be hiring? Which regions should we be going after if we're a sales organization? What are some of the best practices we should be applying? How are we implementing our culture? Are we prioritizing our budget correctly? And so on and so forth. Now, one of the ways to know if you're actually in focus is if you can take every one of the agenda items and link it to one or more of the vision pillars that are part of the Northern Star definition. This is something that you can do just informally. Every time somebody presents an agenda item, you can just ask, how is this linked? Or there's a more formal way that we've developed that can be done. Are they linked to the values? This goes to the same issue of the vision pillars, only from an identity perspective rather than a destination perspective. And of course, who is attending these management meetings? From my experience, you have three types of people that could be around the table. You have the core management team that's around the table. Then sometimes you have something called an EMLT, an extended management leadership team. And then of course you have anybody else. That could be an analyst, it can be a manager from a different organization that you've invited to participate or to give you a brief. But the general rule is this: most of the management meetings should have only the core management team, at least in the beginning. Because the more people you have around the table, the less likely you are to maintain a true strategic managerial focus. And that's very, very important. So let's take a look just from a bird's eye view of how we can address and improve every one of these variables now that we've kind of learned how to evaluate what the current state is. Let's say that I found that I'm lacking with regards to the Northern Star. What can I do? So if we don't have our vision defined properly, what we want to do is we want to come in and we literally want to write something we call a story of success, or if you will, memories from the future, where we are actually describing in as much detail as possible what that future reality that we're trying to create looks like. And we'll do that using time, meaning what date are we aiming for? Quantity, what are the measurable KPIs, key performance indicators, what are the measurable parameters that will indicate that we've actually gotten there? And of course, can I provide clarity that will remove any chance of different people interpreting that reality differently? Let me give you an example. Let's say that we use time. We said 2 years from today, quantity, we will enlarge our customer base by 3%. That's very measurable, right? It's time bound. But under clarity, 3%, what does that mean? Is that 3% of a certain profile of customer? Is that 3% generated from a certain product that we're trying to promote? Would we say that we want that 3% at the expense of which competitor in which region? There's so much room for interpretation. So we want to make sure that we have a true story of success, a very detailed description of that future. We then want to break that down into pillars. So imagine that you've literally created a picture of success. Now cut that picture into, imagine it was a puzzle, right? And break that picture into 4, 5, 6 big pieces of the puzzle. And every one of those pieces is a pillar. And from now on, every time we allocate resources in a certain direction, every time we talk about a certain agenda item, we ask ourselves, which of the pillars is this agenda item contributing to? And when we look across all the agenda items, can we find that maybe we as an organization have a predisposition towards 1 or 2 pillars and are completely blind spotted on some of the other pillars? And finally, if we don't have the proper core values, then of course you want to work towards creating that, and there are best practices and external consultants who can definitely help with that. If you discover that, wow, apparently we don't have the kind of managerial independence that we'd like to have, there are several ways that you can address that. You can start creating different types of management meetings, and I would recommend that you ultimately have 3 types. With regards to managerial independence, I'll talk about 2. One type is the standard operational kind of meeting, which, by the way, most likely you're already having today, but you're calling it a management meeting or a strategic meeting, which it isn't. And in operational meetings, you can A, have them as much as you want, B, the rule is not everybody has to attend. And then what you want to have is different management members reaching out to other management members and meeting to discuss certain operational topics and taking care of business without waiting for the full attendance of the entire management team and without constantly being subject to the review of the chairman. The second thing you want to do is you want to make sure that in more and more meetings where management gets together, the chairman doesn't necessarily have to attend. So for instance, don't attend, have them not attend the operational meetings, and make sure that they do attend the strategic meetings, and boom, you're already taking a step towards managerial independence. If you have a problem with silo versus cross, this is where I would recommend the third type of management meeting, which it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it should definitely be several times a year. And I call these inspirational sessions. What we do here is we dedicate an entire management meeting to a topic that would apparently seem to be completely disconnected from any operational challenge that we're currently dealing with, doesn't look at our vision, doesn't look at our pillars, just takes some kind of case study from beyond the realm, even beyond the industry we're operating in, and talk about it. How is the Western world today dealing with education and the theory that education kills creativity? For instance, how did Japan deal with the massive earthquake it went through? How are cities promoting innovation? What are some of the major innovations in transportation? It can be anything. Some of the breakthroughs in other forms of science and medicine. An amazing new book that came out. It doesn't matter. The idea here is that you're taking a topic that is so far removed, apparently, from any immediate consideration that the team may be dealing with operationally or even strategically, is that there's no opportunity for anybody around the table to be pulling in their direction. It's just a general topic that we can all enrich ourselves on. So this kind of creates the habit of sitting around the table and discussing an item without having that silo predisposition affecting your mindset. The second thing that does, of course, is that it broadens your horizon as a leadership team. If you are a leadership team, you're dealing with challenges such as decision making in states of uncertainty or operating within highly complex environments. When it comes to complexity and uncertainty, how to deal with these 2 challenges is a universal approach, and it doesn't matter which domain you're operating in. So if we can actually go beyond our own domain, beyond our product, beyond our company, beyond our industry, just beyond, and look at what other people are doing, that can give us a lot of insight. And so the way these meetings are conducted is every meeting is managed by somebody else. You take turns managing it, which addresses the managerial independence as well. It lets every management member choose the topic they want to bring to the table. So that's another issue of getting to know my team better and allowing people expression. And then They introduce a topic, 15 to 20 minutes, then you have an open discussion about that topic, and then at the end, if you'd like, it's great if you summarize for 15 minutes and say, this is what I've learned, this is what we as a team can learn from this case study, and this is some of the insights that we can take back to our business, and this is why this is still a management meeting, because ultimately it will link to strategic aspects that you're dealing with. And of course, this is very important to conduct, I would recommend, in the very least, twice a year, a periodical management retreats, also known as offsites, 2 days, 3 days, in person, intensive format of sitting around the table. And there's an entire approach, an entire methodology that we've developed made of 6 key components of how to produce a successful offsite. Finally, when it comes to managerial focus, first, there's a special validation process for agenda items where you have to be able to do 3 things in order for an agenda item to be received on the list of items that are being discussed in a management meeting. Number 1, you have to be able to frame the challenge that you're trying to solve. Number 2, you have to be able to link that topic to one or more of the vision pillars and show which one it contributes to most and why. And finally, you have to be able to define the outcome, the desired outcome of that specific conversation. What are you trying to achieve at the end of this conversation? What questions are you trying to answer? What decisions do you want to have met? How will you know at the end of these 30, 40, 50 minutes of discussion that the discussion yielded what it needed to yield? And so this is the format. We've developed a special format that allows you to take this step. You're welcome to get in touch with us and we'll be happy to share it with you. So I hope that this has been effective and helpful for you in understanding how you can take your management meetings to another level and how you can help shift from a very, very tactical operational approach to a more high-level strategic approach where the people sitting around the table are the ones who are coming up with the most creative, the most paradigm-challenging strategic solutions that then the entire organization can get behind and implement. For any additional information, please feel free to contact me. You have my email here, or to visit our website and download some of the methodologies that I've been talking about. Good luck.